Welcome back to the Big Boys Table. And by welcome back, I of course mean welcome us back because we're the ones who are back. You guys are just on the channel and you've been following the content. So what's up, Mesk? It's episode 53. That's a 3. So
that is 5 and 3. 5 is almost a Metzen number. It's close. Sometimes when they don't like 3, they go to 5.
Yeah, and then you said like 7 is the mutated cousin or something.
Yeah, 7 is kind of like the bastard child you don't really know about because he's trapped in the basement screaming.
Speaking of trapped in the basement screaming, dude, what happened in the last 2 years? Because we did just talk privately before starting this about what was like the time that happened. This last episode was 2020 in August, and we are now in June of 2022. So it's almost 2 years.
It's been a while.
It has been a while. You covered a little bit of the goings on and the events in the interview that we did on the No Frauds Club channel, which I guess I'll link in the description for people who haven't seen it. But the I mean, I don't know how much detail you feel like going into on this side, because I know you've also covered it in your own content, but maybe we can just start with where are you right now? What's going on? Well, you know, there's loads of shit we got to catch up on, basically.
Well, I'll go through the whole shebang, and you can just kind of jump in whenever you want.
Okay.
Although I'm going to be fairly concise about most of it. So apparently we did our last major recording, Big Boys Table, in 18th or something of August 2020, and I'm still trying to piece together how the hell I actually sat down to do the recording at that time, because basically that point in the year, so the general rundown that I may or may not have mentioned at Big Boys Table is I had 2 cats, and they were Persians, and one of them had like chronic eye problems that had shown up ever since like the end of 2013. So that had always been kind of an eternally long struggle with back and forth. Probably the worst being the melting ulcer scare back in, I think, 2015. Well, the end of 2019, she had what I think to be a stroke. Like we don't really know because we're not really sure. But she really freaked out. We brought her to the vet, and her blood pressure was insane. And it was going to basically rip the retinas out of her eyes. So this was a very different issue than the chronic ulcer issues that she had. It was a really bad thing. So basically, the lowdown of it is that she had kidney failure. Now, she was a Persian, and Persians are kind of prone to medical issues in general. Plus, generally, this goes for basically any animal that you buy, but especially with any animal that can have some kind of genetic issues, and cats are all an inbred mess, and genetic issues are very common, is the breeders are supposed to give you some kind of documentation that says they did DNA testing or something like that. This animal is clear of certain hereditary issues, or you know that the bloodline's good or whatever. You're supposed to get that. Well, we never got that. Snowball was a stray that we picked up, and then the other cat we got off breeder, and we never got any information about him either. But Snowball was like 17 at the time, so unfortunately kidney problems are things that come up. And kidney problems, when you have kidney failure, so the thing with kidney failure and heart failure is it doesn't mean that your organ is gone, that it just stopped, because if it just stopped, you'd be dead. Basically, the kidneys clean out your blood. So what failure means is that they're less efficient. So there's a few reasons it can be less efficient: age, hereditary, diet, so on and so forth. So this was in probably some mix of the above, right? What it means is that you have to change the diet. So there's 4 stages to kidney failure. And the 4th stage is like close to terminal, but not terminal. 4th stage, what I had read is that 4th stage, if you have a cat in 4th stage kidney failure, they can survive for a year, 2 years maybe, give or take. She originally was diagnosed stage 2, and then it went to stage 3 with tests. So that was 2022 for me, was managing that. And unfortunately, what we didn't know, even though we were doing regular testing and monitoring at the time, is that there was some other issue that came a result of this. And we don't know if it's as a result of the kidney failure. It can be, but basically the red blood cell count was dropping. And I guess what can happen is that when the kidneys start to have problems, the body stops producing red blood cells. And when we did our routine check, because when you have kidney failure, you do routine blood tests and everything to make sure that it's not getting too much worse and stuff like that. And in July, the test said that her red blood cell count was about a third of what it should have been when you do blood transfusions. So it was already very bad. The problem with animals is that they hide stuff. They're very, very good at hiding stuff, because if you show weakness as an animal, predators capitalize on it. It's ingrained into them to hide pain, to try to not change their behavior schedules. And when you have Persians who are very sedated cats to begin with, it's really, really, really hard to tell when something is changing in them that's over a long course of time, like the red blood cell count or the kidneys, until something really snaps out at you. The red blood cell count was going to be a do or die situation, because we weren't going to put her through blood transfusions every month, and they cost almost $1,000 and require overnight stays. And yeah, it was not really going to happen. So the other thing I wanted to do was to try to give them an injection that's supposed to encourage the body to produce red blood cells. But at that point, soon after we started that, she started to decline very rapidly, and unfortunately on August 5th, she was put down. So that was a very devastating event. The two cats are basically my only family. They're really the only reason I was continuing to push on. And it really surprises me to have just discovered, before we did this recording, we actually did a Big Boys Table on August 18, which obviously was very soon after.
Yeah.
I think it's just because registration is very slow for me at that point. But it wasn't long. Like, there was a lot of stuff. There's always a lot of crazy stuff happening in my life. I've talked a little bit about it in these casts. And, you know, like video casting and making mods and stuff like that. It's always been like, that's my escapism. And the cats were sort of like, they've been in my life for a long time. Snowball died at the age of 18. And we had her since she was little. So she had kind of just always been there. She was the stability in my life. So she was survived by Smokey, who is another Persian. At that point, soon after that last Big Boys Table, I basically disappeared from most stuff on the internet. The one thing I kept doing at that point was actually D&D. So I think we've talked to some extent about D&D and Big Boys Table, and probably end up talking more about it as time goes on. I discussed it a little bit within the interview that we did. When Snowball, like in the months prior to her death, obviously she had to have a cone on for a long time, because she could literally just rub the corneas off her eyes. And too many times had we tried to take it off, and she had almost lost her eyes from getting after them when, you know, at some point in the day I have to sleep, but I can't watch her. Well, the months prior to that, we took off her cone for good, and I just watched her. I just did not sleep. So I slept in maybe like 10, 15-minute intervals, which is one of the things I kind of had to struggle with. Is all throughout all that time and watching her, there's many times I've had to kind of force my sleep to be like that. Now, this is even something that might even be an interesting subject to revisit in some point. But the way that I usually did projects, when I was very serious about projects back in like Retribution in 2013, before all this started, is my work schedule, as I was telling you before, is I would actually stay up for almost a week at a time. And then I would have like a 1 or 2 day sleep after that. And I would just stay up, because it was so much easier for me to focus after a certain point. Well, with the cat, you had to do that too, because you were managing drugs. You were doing the job of like nurses. Usually when an animal's in an emergency situation, or a person's in an emergency situation, you have them at a hospital, and a nurse or a team of nurses watches over them and maintains their drugs. And obviously I couldn't afford that, so I did that, which meant sleeping in 30-minute intervals at best. That fucked my sleep so bad that in the years to come, I would pretty much never recover from that. And unfortunately, to cut a very long story short, just when I was kind of like trying to get back into the shape of things last year, my other cat spontaneously developed major health issues out of nowhere. One day, he just kind of developed paralysis over the course of a few hours. I had to take him to emergency care, and not at my normal vet. It was very expensive. We picked him up in the morning. They just said, "Oh, it's just a simple infection." Not a week later, he developed paralysis again at 3 a.m. I held on to him, and my vet opened at 8, and we had been clients with him for so long, I knew we could take him there and get him looked at and deal with the finances after the fact. He died at 7:30, so he just kind of developed this strange issues and died out of nowhere, and we have no idea why. So that was in July. That was July 23rd last year. So on top of the general run and tumble, incredible insanity of my life, I had both of my cats die not even within a year of each other. And the second one was terrible, beyond terrible. With Snowball, you always kind of were dancing on that line because of her other health issues. Smokey was like 12 years old and had no real health issues or any indication of issues beforehand, other than having to deal with a broken tooth and just like general cleanup in his mouth like a half year prior. This was completely out of nowhere. So, that's where my 2 years have went. That's why I've not been around. That's why I've not been very active. In that time span, I also lost GameProc. DreamHost decided they had changed an internal. I think this was. Let me check my records here. It was either last year. Yeah, it was last year, the beginning of last year, or rather the end of 2020. DreamHost told us that they no longer host files. I think what happened is they changed their internal. They changed their internal policy. They started advertising that they use SSDs for storage because you use SSDs for store. It's very expensive and pointless.
Yeah,
I don't know, but that was our guess because we've had this kind of thing with them for the last like decade at that point, ever since I started putting files in there. And I think before then, because Ricky used to host a lot of audio recordings in there, he had issues with too. If you have a file or something that's over 100 megabytes, their bots will trip it and be like, "Hey, are you using this?" Because their terms of service is basically you're not supposed to use it for hosting files. You have to have it on a website and available. So we'd have to tell them, "Yeah, this is our site. You know, this content's available. You can look at it and you can grab it and do whatever." And they're like, "Oh, okay. That's fine." Because they advertise unlimited hosting. It's just it has to be available. Well, that changed. That changed in the beginning of 2021. They said, "Oh, okay, that's great. Just delete everything." And so I had over 2 terabytes of files at that point, representing over 16 years of content, ranging from mods and tools that weren't available anywhere else on the internet to, of course, all the video content. I just had to straight up delete everything. So that was a really, like, I'd always been on the fence about GameProc because there's many times, especially after the cat died, that I was pretty certain I was never going to return to casting or anything of that nature. And now, but I hadn't ever, it wasn't my decision to do it. Like, it hadn't ever been something I had actually finalized because I was not comfortable just deleting 16 years of data. And now, right out of the blue, there was nothing I could do about it at all. And that really pissed me off, and that really demoralized me. So, I think I can put the mods back up, and they might not scream about it. I think that I have the Retribution audiobook pointing to... no, I do actually have Retribution's audiobook on the server right now, and they haven't bitched about it. That's 500 megabytes, so... I expect it at any point because apparently they still send Labyrinth emails about other stuff on other subdomains that are unrelated. And yeah, we've tried to search for alternative hosting solutions, but they really don't exist. So
yeah, I actually have my own DreamHost story way back where I started doing the same fucking thing where I was hosting LP files, and they very early on, I don't know if you were just grandfathered in or they like flagged you as like, "Oh, don't bother him." But very early on in like 2012, they were emailing me like, please, you are using too much of our unlimited space. Please delete these files. Was basically the email.
They specifically said we're using 60% of a hard drive. And we're like, like that costs pennies to a company like DreamHost. Like hard drives, they go through thousands of hard drives all the time just because they fail. Because they have just that many hard drives.
Yeah.
Right? They just have so many, and that some will reach their end of life, wear and tear, so on and so forth. It will just, they go through, it's pennies to them. And it's like, yes, my 16 years of data is using 60% of one of your hard drives. Wow, golly, I have it spread across like 8 of my own. Like it is the dumbest excuse imaginable.
Yeah, it's just like if you're not a file host, if you're not a hosting service, like a site hosting service, including an FTP and all that shit, then like why have these features and also advertise that they're unlimited?
The recommendation was to use unrelated third-party services. Yeah. To not even use their own solutions. They're literally telling you to be a customer for someone else.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, so I look at it like this is, I guess, a bit of a personal question, so feel free to opt out of it. But you've obviously, like you were talking about, you were referencing and alluding to like just the nonstop insanity. You know, like it's been even before the more devastating losses of the cats and then like the fucking game product DreamHost shit. Things weren't exactly peachy, but you were managing, and then this hits. Now you're back in. I mean, you're in this recording right now, and we did the interview, and you've been doing video casts again. You've obviously continued to maintain the D&D stuff. Do you feel like at the end of it, like you said earlier that the sleep thing really fucked you, and you might not be able to recover from that. Like you haven't yet been able to recover from that physically.
It's rough.
Do you think at this point, like, have you gained any insight? Because if something like this string of things happened to me, and then at the end I came out of it, and I was like, well, I'm still doing work, you know, it's been slow, it's not as much as I would like, it's not as productive or whatever, but I'm getting back to some semblance of like doing work on a daily basis and being content with my days as a result. That would teach me something, or like that would communicate to me that like, well, this is just who I am. Like I'm a person who does work in this environment. Like I still have these skills, and I'm still working on the Unreal project. I'm still working on all this other stuff. Like that would, I mean, I don't know how much of a solace it would be or how comforting it would be, but it would be like something that I feel like at the end of the day, I'd probably be able to be somewhat proud of, is the fact that I did go through all these hardships, and I'm still dealing with bullshit, and like the fact that my site doesn't work anymore because of DreamHost, and then like all of the other stuff that continues to happen that's insane, and I'm still able to, like, now we're at a stage where I'm still able to do stuff anyway. Like, do you feel like you've gained any insight into like who you are or what you're capable of as a result of this, or do you not have any sort of rosy, like, positive outlook on it at all? Like, what's your sort of mindset like?
Well, there's definitely nothing really positive to come out of it, but there are a lot of things to come out of it. So in the end of 2019, when Snowball's little stroke or whatever first happens, that was the trigger for me getting into Unreal. I'm not really sure what I've thought about it for a long time. What exactly is this interaction? Well, I've always been living under the pretense that any day could be my last. Because the finances are insane, the landlord's insane, I've had to deal with constant lunacy left and right, my own health has been in steady decline for a long time, and the cats are not going to live forever, and I knew I wasn't really going to be able to survive their loss. And then that happened, and it's like, I expected her to die at that point, it was devastating, but now you are presented, you know, she can live, you just got to switch her diet, which was very difficult, very, very difficult. And then she started losing weight really rapidly. She was already a tiny cat. I think a healthy weight for, I can't remember if it was kilograms or pounds, because I don't, the machines never told me, but she was 2.6 normally. That was her healthy weight. She dropped to like 1.4, 1.5. So she lost a lot of body weight, and that was really scary. And that was trying to switch her to the new diet. The food, because basically they can't take in protein anymore. They have to have it. Well, rather, that's not completely accurate, actually. I fell into the trap. The trap is when you have kidney failure, you stop taking protein because you can't process protein. No, that's not actually true. You are taking protein. It's higher quality protein is what it is. So this is kind of one of the problems with animals is that animal food is stupidly expensive, especially in this country. And a lot of the animal food is not very good quality. So when you're struggling like we are, you can't afford to buy, medically authorized food all the time. And the cats are also, our cats were stupidly picky eaters too. They were, it was hard to get them to eat stuff consistently. And that's a developmental problem where they've had different food when they were young and they kind of just get accustomed to eating different stuff all the time. Our cats were both like that. Again, they eat stuff was really hard. Now, you try to switch into a diet of food, it's very much not like regular food. It tastes very different and they really don't like it. It's a routine. Now, I don't really do with routines, but this is something that you, again, just like the drugs, I'm adverse to schedules. I'm adverse to structure. I don't like doing this stuff. I don't like, having to get up in the morning. I don't like having to put out the garbage. I don't like having to work on the yard every week. I just kind of do it when I can, and I end up being very lackadaisical about it in general. With the cat stuff, you take it seriously. No, it's not pleasant to manage your sleep in this way, but what are you going to do? Just watch a cat die? Fuck that. There is a point when you hit these serious subjects where it's just like, you don't even consider the alternatives. You just do it. There was along the way, along this long journey from when her eye stuff began to this point, where many people questioned what I'm doing. They would say, why would you do all this just for an animal? I had saved up enough money by the end of 2013. I was looking at buying a render farm, putting together my own internal server network, basically taking the next big step to being self-sufficient, because I wanted to get into like rendering, because that's when I was working in Retribution, and I wanted to get into rendering. I hadn't really gotten into Unreal at that point, but basically later on I discovered, hey, I don't need this because I can do it in Unreal. But I was still looking at like offloading, video encoding, video rendering, stuff like that to a little farm. So I was sitting on, I also wanted a network attached storage too, because I wanted to have more permanence in my storage. Well, suffice to say, I just decommissioned a hard drive that had 13 and a half years of runtime on it. That's not how old it was, that's how long it had been active. So that never happened. I lost all that money. I lost all net income. We got evicted. Everything afterwards has been a struggle. In fact, your money that you gave me some money in 2020, and so did someone else for my birthday, and that's what paid for Snowball's urn. So yeah, everything's been a struggle. And people say, well, why do you go through all this? Why do you spend all this money? Maybe you should just put the cat down and be done with it. And yeah, no. When it comes to stuff like this, there's no question in my mind. I'm going to do this. And that interaction at that point kind of extended to the fact that I had wanted to get into game design ever since at that point, 10 years ago, like with Project Offset and all that I talked about in the interview. And now something serious was happening, and it was just kind of like an interaction of the schedule that I had to do with her. Looking after her drugs and watching her got spilled over onto the project, where my time became much more pressured and much more valuable, and I wanted to make as much use of that time that I had left. So I got into Unreal 4. I wanted to make something like DMC, but not crappy. Something like Dark Souls, but not easy. Something like God of War, but not gay. And my whole intent at that point was to make most of the time I had, and I'd always had these resources available, but I knew people who had experience in the subject. I took advantage of those and got it. And within a month, I had a lot of basic stuff in. Within 2 months, I had AI combat engine. I had done animation remastering and stuff like that in 3ds Max very terribly. I didn't have rigs or anything like that, but I got into it. The project kind of floundered in January because I was reaching a lot of limitations with my skill set. I still had learning disabilities. I couldn't really get past that. But I had begun a D&D project in January called Autumn Winds. In fact, while I was watching Snowball in my room, I was writing it out on my tablet. And to this day, I'm still not sure why I decided to do that at that point, because at the very least, looking after her was going to get more and more difficult as time went on. I had maybe an hour or two in the day to my name that I could work on this, but I was working on it. And I thought, well, if within half a year, I'll get this started. So I decided to continue that after the fact. And I think coming out of all of this, and especially with Smokey in particular, when Smokey was dying and the hours are ticking down, when he did die, it was like there was a moment where you kind of like I've struggled for a long time trying to learn skills and trying to learn, like, especially modeling is really the big one, is trying to get into graphics for the last 20 years. And then here I am with a cat that I really don't want to die, and it's dying, and there's nothing I can do about it. And it really, what it does is it puts the rest of your life into perspective. All these years I've spent struggling and whinging and whining and struggling with this stuff. And all the things I have learned and all the things I've tried to learn, and how little all that actually matters. And how little all these struggles really mean. Because the things that really have value to you, the things that really actually mattered, all of that time you have spent and wasted fucking around with all this other shit, none of that matters. None of that means anything. None of that prepared you for this moment. None of that got you closer to where you wanted to be. And now that there was a real situation going on where you could have had, well, there was probably nothing I could have done anyways. It was probably something very serious. Something to cause paralysis and then to basically, I'm not really sure what happened, but it could have been like cancer, like bone marrow cancer or something like that. Could have cropped up over the years and never in all the blood tests didn't find it or something. Because this cat, I ticked all the boxes. The cat had gone through so many x-rays, all the blood tests and everything like that. And whatever this was, it never got caught by any of this stuff. You did all the right things and it didn't matter. None of it really mattered. Like, it really showed you just how powerless you really were. And as a result of that, the outcome of how I viewed a lot of stuff changed. Before all that happened last year with Smokey, I was working on Unreal again. I was trying to get back into that. And then that stuff with Smokey happened, and that was absolutely devastating, and that really killed the momentum I was trying to get back. But at the same time, I realized how little point there was in the last 20 years I had spent with digital content, struggling with all this stuff, like the modeling and stuff like that, and how little all the emotion that was behind that really mattered. It didn't get me anything. It didn't get me anywhere. I wasn't any closer to building the projects. It didn't help me with the cats. It just didn't matter. So much of my life had been wasted in this pursuit of custom content that wasn't spent on actually just building the fucking content. The only way you're ever going to make change is by sitting down and doing it. Now, I've been preaching that for a long time, because that's how what's been preached to me is just to sit down and do it and stop thinking. You know, I never was a planning kind of guy. I never was a guy to premeditate stuff. I don't write down game documents. I just sit down and I do it. That's why I've got dozens of StarCraft total conversions behind me. A lot of which were just really basic stuff, just some graphics, some ideas. Because I would rather sit down and try to make the idea than think about it or write about it. But there was so much hesitation and so much fear because of those failures and failures and other stuff, like failures with graphics, that I failed so many times that I just didn't want to get into it anymore. And within 2010 to 2019, let's say, there was so much of that hesitation and doubt and fear. As a result of facing these extraordinary events in a way that even I can't escape from them, that makes you realize how futile and how foolish all of that really was. And it takes a lot to instigate change in me, because I'm very resistant to change. I'm old and set in my ways. And that's very true with the innate thinking processes. But those events really catalyzed that. And what ultimately came as a result of that is I stopped being afraid anymore. I stopped being afraid of things anymore. I mean, life had already handed me the worst possible things it could have handed to me. There was nothing to fear anymore. So I stopped fearing death. I stopped fearing, financial ruin. I stopped fearing all this shit. I stopped, wringing my hands over investments into this Unreal project. And then in December, I got into weight painting, and I weight painted the Worgen model to the mannequin, so I could finally use the animations I'd already had. And we started putting more time into that and trying to get back with D&D. So that ended up being longer than I wanted it to be, but that brings us to present day, where I've done some video casting. Autumn Winds, that I began, towards the apex of this insanity starting, is finally nearing its completion. Yesterday, we just played a session. We're on what is a part of the final encounter, and went through a chunk of that. And now I'm looking towards the game probably has just a handful of sessions left. And I'll be setting that down, and other than the main campaign, I'll be moving away from D&D, trying to get back into video casting, trying to get back into other stuff. And, right now, our landlord tried to shake us down for another $500 a month in rent because, that's just how things go in Canada. As you get blackmailed, basically they said, give us this money or we'll sell. They didn't ultimately end up selling it. So we don't know what's going on, but we're expecting the worst at any point. So that's just the constant fear I've had to live with for all this time. When we had our housing I probably talked about this in one of the past Big Boys tables. I honestly don't remember anything about them. But when we transitioned housing ownership a couple of years, I think it was 2018, our rent got hiked by $300 illegally, but there was nothing we could do about it. We couldn't bitch about it. We would just get kicked out, and then, this is Canada. As a renter, you're fucked. You are fucked top to bottom. Nobody's out to help you. There is no place to live, nowhere to go, and a lot of places are even more expensive than this. We're paying upwards of over $3,000 a month total, and that is cheap by Canadian standards. And that's just the way I've had to live all this time. As after 2014, it's just at any point you could have everything yanked up from under you, and that would be that. And it's hard to go on in spite of that. It's hard to I'm autistic, like literally autistic, not meme autistic like Reddit, but actually autistic. I do not take well to changes of environments, and I've just been put through these extreme circumstances over and over and over and over. And, everything has always been on the line every single day. As I've said, every week goes by, something stupid happens. And at the end of the day, I still try to sit down and make D&D. I still have made every session. They've been very rough. I've been on the line many times. And a lot of that's not just because I don't got time. It's because I don't got energy and motivation. But, push comes to shove. I try to make the cut and try to get things together. And now we've had the cat incidents, and I come out of it. And being afraid of stuff up to this point, being afraid of commitment, I can understand why I was like that. But coming out of the cats, I can now more understand how absolutely pointless it is. How foolish it was to be afraid of failure. For so many years when I started, I didn't care about failing. I jumped into everything imaginable. I tried to make music. Obviously, voice acting came from my tape deck days. I struggled with modeling for 20 years until I finally really gave up on it. Until the end of last year when I got into weight painting. Animation, stuff like that. Programming I was too afraid to get into. Well, with Unreal, I'm using visual. I'm using blueprints, which is basically Visual C++, but you're still dealing with programmatic concepts that I have a hard time wrapping my head around. And I just went into it. There was no hesitation at that point when that was all online. And it took me this many years to get to this point. And that's disappointing. I'm going to be 35 years old soon. And I haven't accomplished hardly anything compared to the time I've put in that other people have. Like, I watch your projects not really intimately, but I watch you stream every day. You're working on Antikythera, and before that, Hydra and Cosmonarchy and all these other things. And you guys are getting into reverse engineering and stuff like that. And this was stuff that I had brushed shoulders with as far back. I was looking at custom engines and working with, you know, engines and working with reverse engineering and stuff like that way back in Armageddon Onslaught. I never got into it. I never had the balls to get into it. And you're going through that with housing changes, and you've got jobs to manage, and then you're doing all these interviews on the side, and it's like, you know, from my perspective, you kind of came from my audience. You picked up a thing or two from me, and then you kind of spread your wings on your own. And then I've been kind of like stuck in that mire that I got trapped in within like 2010, where I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. And then I let that doubt consume me. And then after, you know, July 23rd last year when Smokey died, you know, the thing that I walked away from that is I can no longer let doubt consume me. You know, I can no longer be afraid of anything. I have to get in there. If these things are things I really want to do, there is no more time, no more room for hesitation. And I have nothing more to fear because the worst things have already happened. So that's where I walked out of that.
Well, it might be hard to fully appreciate. I mean, it sounds like you've really taken it to heart, but it's not. It also seems like to me, if I were still, you know, dealing with the fallout of a situation like that, which who knows how long it will take, if it is even possible to become whole again, so to speak. But it might be difficult to fully appreciate the degree to which that kind of like paradigm shift, it really can be a far-reaching impact. So, you know, the idea that, there's no point in, I basically had a similar thing, although not born from some negative, like devastating experience necessarily. But, you know, I can't remember exactly what year it was, but when I was just getting started with learning assembly and reverse engineering and trying to understand what the machine code was actually doing. And, you know, we didn't have the tools or had access to the tools that we have access to now for reverse engineering, which makes it a little bit easier, although not without stupid issues, where there's like a thing that will try to translate it into C code, which we can then translate it for the plugin injector. But you know, specifics aside, it's like, I think the biggest issue that I always had with learning anything, and this is broadly applicable, but I specifically had it in the case of programming, is I just knew it wouldn't ever click like instantly. And I knew there was always going to be something that's like, well, in order to actually be the person who can do the things that I want to do, I have to like do so much work, and it probably won't even be for years. And at some point I just said, well, maybe that's true. And maybe I'll discover that it's actually easier, but I'll never know unless I try. And I slowly started to move things. I have this, like, I always go back to this example where I have this image of like a desktop, and there are two folders, and there's the folder of things I can do, and then there's the folder of things that I can't do. And this is not a literal factual thing. It's just, these are my mental folders. And I started taking shit out of the things I can't do folder and putting them into the things that I can do, or things I should try to do if you want to make a new folder, because 3 folders is obviously better. 3. And I've slowly started building up this idea that actually what I should be doing is trying to see what I can do. You know, I've dabbled in 3D stuff with Blender, and I, you know, never really had much of an excuse to do it before, but I started like fucking around with really small things. I started screwing around with sculpting, and I haven't done animation or rigging yet, but, and it's not even something I'm actively doing right now in the moment, but stuff like that, I wouldn't have even started to attempt if I hadn't gotten over the initial hurdle regarding programming stuff. And even then, I think I can trace back like the mental shift of that with AI scripting, where, if you can believe it, I was seriously, in air quotes, making projects that didn't involve AI scripting because I thought that was too complicated. And eventually I just said, fuck it, I'm going to try it. And I had some people help me out at the time, like, for example, the classic N, good old homie, he helped me out. And at the time, he was pretty instructive with like what the commands do. And then we eventually, like, but because I wanted to do more things than what the tools allowed me to, I was like able to get people to build better tools for stuff, which was lucky. And one of the only moments where the community actually felt like a community before I built my own. So I kind of got lucked out there. But like, the point is, you don't get to the point that you're talking about where you don't have the hesitance, the resistance towards doing something. Because of all of the fears and all of the what ifs and all of the, it feels insurmountable or daunting. You don't get past that until you actually try it and then like disprove the premise in the beginning. Like, I guess there's a thing where you can take from this a meta-contextual lesson that can apply broadly to your whole life, which is what you were just describing, which is don't fuck around, don't wait, don't agonize over details that you're not sure yet. Just go in, jump in, do the work, see what happens. And maybe you'll be true. Like maybe it will be true that like actually my skills aren't good enough, and you know the amount of work to make my skills good enough to do this thing would be too much or whatever. Like I'm not willing to do that. I still think that maybe there's part of that that's like a story we tell ourselves as opposed to real. But maybe it is actually real, you know. And there's only so many things you can spend your time on, and only so many things you really ought to want to spend your time on. So choose wisely, I guess. But don't use that as an excuse to not try something, especially if it's a skill that you just don't have yet. Like that's sort of what I take from your experience, and I am trying to like admittedly see like a very terrible situation and then say like, well, the tiniest silver lining is buried in here, and maybe I can like poke at it and it'll get bigger. So I'm trying to make your silver lining bigger by poking at it. So hopefully it's working. But the point is basically just that, you know, you can't. You very easily could have just allowed yourself to be consumed by the enormity of your situation, both the emotional side and the like. It's not even like there was a reasonable like stress-free other than the cat's deaths that would have allowed you to like grieve and if it's even possible to properly like associate with those feelings and those events, like do that. You couldn't even do that because you had all the other bullshit. Yeah. You very easily could have allowed yourself to just get consumed by that forever and never come back, and never like not just come back to like us in the server or like broadly speaking work, but like just never do anything again and become like a husk of a human. And you didn't. And I think that there's while it's hard to appreciate how meaningful your victory in that sense is, it probably doesn't feel at all like a victory. I would interpret it as such, and I would say that I admire that, and I find it impressive that you were actually able to go past that, and you're actually able to come back to it now and come back to Unreal Engine. And you just started, I saw today earlier in the server, we're talking about moving on to Unreal Engine 5 and making that leap. And I guess the fact that you were even like deciding to do that today is probably downstream of the fact that you're no longer worried about jumping into something new and feeling it out. You are in some ways back to what I've heard you describe previously as like some of your best years of work, where you were able to just jump in and do shit. So I don't know what you make of all that. Maybe we just move on to the next point, but I wanted to say that anyway, because I don't know how many people are giving you attaboys and telling you shit, but I think it's impressive that you're able to come back anyway.
Sometimes you poke it so hard the skin rips.
Oh shit. And then you have to use your mouth to fix it, right? Isn't that the line?
So it's definitely not. It's not a positive thing. I mean, growth. People are shaped by their experiences, and many things cause you to grow in some shape or manner. It's growth, which in itself is, you know, it can be construed as a positive thing. In this case, it's neither here nor there. The grieving process was all messed up because I didn't have time to grieve. I had to deal with the fallout of somebody's dementia, you know, medical stuff elsewhere, dealing with the house, the landlord, everything that would come as a result of that. And I just didn't really have time to think anymore. My brain just kind of shut down at that point. And now, you know, with Autumn Wind reaching its conclusion, it's hitting pretty hard now, because that was started in the backbone of all this happening. And in the span of Autumn Wind, all these horrible things have happened. And when I set down Autumn Wind, I always feel shitty when I set down a project anyways. But this is going to make me feel extra shitty because now we're finally setting down that legacy. And then along with it, the legacy of D&D as well. And it's the end of a lot of things, and we're finally setting these things down that we've kind of just been in this lockstep march with for all this time. We're finally setting it down. We're finally saying, okay, it's time to try to focus on new ventures. I finished a Brood War cast, and I finished Doom Eternal cast, both of which I had started. Brood War being also a sensitive subject, because the reason why I even did Brood War was because Wybod basically paid for it. And the money that I needed, the only reason I agreed to that is because I needed the money to pay for Smokey's dental and medical stuff that was happening in January. So now I picked that up now, I think.
Oh, that creates so many fucking weird associations, I bet, with like doing the work in the first place. Especially since you, as I recall, the Brood War thing especially had like a delay in between like starting and finishing, and you had to close it out, but it was like after all of the shit had gone down. So yeah, that was probably a really weird one.
It was Yeah, it is. And then with, of course, with the Unreal project, it was started because of all this too. So we're gonna get back into that, and we'll be feeling it every time. But um, on the end of the day, you know, you can get worked up about it, but that doesn't usually help you work on the project. If you really want to get the project done, you've got to look at it and be like, well, you know, if you really want to get this done, it's well past time to stop pussyfooting around and really set your foot down and start taking feet pics. And with weight painting in particular, I used Blender for that. And Blender is like a demented science fair project that for some reason people started actually using as a program.
Industry standard software, bro.
I've heard a lot of interesting things that companies won't use it because if you make like a plugin or a tool for it, it falls under open source and they can't hold it. But then I was told that the copyright actually, if it's built under a contract, it would be held by the company. So, but in any event, I think most people don't use Blender just because it's fucking terrible software. The UI in that program is absolutely horrendous. And, but the FBX support in my version of 3ds Max with Unreal had produced a lot of strange issues. And Blender did have a better UV system. And the mannequin tools I was using, Mr. Mannequin, was for Blender. So I just wanted to be just as compatible with Unreal as possible and put this on the mannequin skeleton and in a system that I had real-time access to the developer on anyways. So he was there to assist me along the journey. And it was a long journey. Just weight painting this fairly low poly character. I had to remodel portions of it too, the legs in particular. And there was still a lot of stuff I wanted to do, like the hair and the tail that I haven't done yet because I don't even know what to do about those. But the weight painting took me close to a month. And at the end of the day, one of the reasons why it took so fucking long was because Blender kept like weighting random portions of the model. And I had to get advice from somebody else on how to deal with that, which is to lock vertex groups so it wouldn't just randomly start painting those. And once I got that sorted out, and then at the end of the day, I had a Blizzard model in Unreal 4 that was weighted to the mannequin and looked better and more consistent, produced better results than a lot of the assets you can buy on the marketplace. So at the end of the day, I would like to improve that asset a lot, and again, the hair and make a tail and stuff like that for it, and get it all prettied up and looking the part. I don't know if I'll actually keep it at the end of the day, but it was an experience, and it was one of those necessary experiences to get into it. Because at the end of the day, when I was finished, that I could say with confidence, "Hey, if I ever find another asset I want to use that's better for whatever reason, I can probably put that on the mannequin too. I can probably figure that out." And I learned a lot about some of the subjects that I was only loosely familiar at that point, like corrective bones and what they serve. And, you know, how linear bone weighting works and its innumerable limitations and why it's garbage.
Yeah.
And all these hacks that developers and stuff use. Like, along the way, all this stuff also serves as a reference point for my reviews and my game casts. Because, you know, that's one of the reasons why I know a lot, is it's just I've dealt with the stuff, at least superficially. Now, I've dealt with something that I had no experience with prior. I only knew superficially. And with more modern stuff that I only had heard about, which is corrective blend shapes, corrective bones, stuff like that. And now I know how a lot of that works. And now I can look at all these games and I can see they're all fucked up, and I know the process to fix them. And I can laugh at them even harder than I already do. So, you know, at the end of the day, it's just a silly thing and it's just a private project. But it was something I wanted to put together, and that's the process that took me to this stage. And it took me that long to get into something that I really should have done at the very beginning, and I was too scared to do that. You know, that's one of the reasons why the project kind of died. You know, after December and whatever, when it started, is the character model proved to be like the retargeting system they had. Oh my god, I could go on a fucking huge rant about this. The retargeting system is basically falsely advertised. They say, oh, retargeting is you can take a model of basically any proportion within reason and apply it to the skeleton, and it'll just work. It doesn't. It's the way that someone described it to me is this like mocap data. They just kind of expect studios to clean it up afterwards because it's really fucked. The biggest example is if you have a weapon, say holding a katana with two hands, if your bones are even ever so slightly different, your hands will be all misaligned, feet will go through the ground and stuff like that. Yeah, that's where I hit that snag and that roadblock, and there's no information on this anywhere about how to fix this stuff. And when I brought it up to a chat room of people filled with animators and industry professionals, the first response I got was, "Well, people who play games already are using suspension of disbelief. Just ignore the problems."
Yeah, of course.
And I'm like, dude, I got a foot fucking 2 feet in the air. Like, just the approach in general, just the insanity was just that.
Suspension of disbelief, suspension of the model in the fucking air. It's great.
Like, I have heard so much bullshit from people in the industry and so much stupid brain dead excuses. But even that one caught me off guard. That was a real bitch slap right out of the blue. And but no, the only way out of it is like manually fixing it. Well, Unreal 5 has an 8K retargeting and it might be better, but I hadn't even thought of doing weight painting when I started it. That never crossed my mind. It was one of those things just like I know that this would get me probably where I wanted. But holy fuck, that's like an insurmountable task. Like I have no experience with Blender. The interface itself is infuriating.
Yeah.
I tried to make like clothing and I couldn't, and now I was going to jump into one of that's considered one of the most difficult and time consuming and tedious processes in all of 3D graphics is rigging and weight painting. There's a reason why that one is an extremely high paying job and is an extremely high demand is because of how tedious and annoying it really is. And,
well, it's funny because it's also probably a source of constant issues, as you discovered when you were detailing them, and games still get it wrong, even though they're apparently paying people a lot of money.
You see like floating vertexes and stretchy shit all over the place. Yeah, that's where you can start the blame at. So to just jump in there, it was too daunting for me. I was too scared to do it. And at that time, I was willing to let the project die on that hill and, focus on other work. But eventually I did return to it. So I'm happy with that now. And yeah, I'm looking at Unreal 5 and moving on to the next step and more advanced stuff. And I've invested into it. And HKS has also invested into it. And it is something I want to see playable at the least. So that's where this road has taken us 2 years down the line. Is into where I wanted to be in 2009, 2010. We're finally here 10 years later, over 10 years later now. And I mean, at least we got here, right? Like there's a guy I talked to. He's a very experienced programmer. And he's been working on a reverse engineering project for a very long time. And the subject has sometimes come up of like, do you ever become time conscious about this? Because it's long. It's reverse engineering and rebuilding a game.
Yeah. And
he's been at it for a long time. And he says, no, it doesn't bother me. I could be at this for most of my life. And, just so long as I get it done and it's of a good quality. And I mean, I think that's a very important standard. It's certainly something we brush shoulders with a lot. We talk about people being too conscious about time. Like the Antioch Chronicles 3 is the one that I think of. Right? Like they were really worried about time and they were talking about Reddit. Someone released something and they're talking about it on Reddit. We got to get this project done, guys. And then, they, in my eyes, they hadn't even really started on the project. And then they were going to shit it out just like that. But in their eyes, it was like, oh, we better start rushing this. And even in the long term, you could enter that mindset without really realizing it. And I was kind of conscious about that in some sense. It's like, oh, it's taking me so long to do this. And that's with D&D too. Some avatars in there have taken me upwards of a month to process fully. But the reality is as long as the end product is of a high quality, it doesn't matter. Right? So, yeah, it took me 10, 12 years to get this point, but at least we're here.
Right, yeah. Well, we've been working on a really heavy update to the Brood War mod, and it's been like, I don't know, it's probably over a month in the making now, which doesn't really sound like that much time, but when it's like day in, day out, and it's an update and not like a new thing, you'd think, oh, it's not going to take that long. But because we just had so many things that we had on the list of the chopping block, then, it's expected that it would take so long. And even then, like, there was a tendency for us to be like, oh man, I really want to share this with like the people who have been following the project for a very long time. And, it's going to be exciting to get it in front of them. We can do some playing or some testing or whatever. There's stuff like that that's really interesting and exciting to do. And if you're not able to do that, then it feels kind of shitty to, I don't know, like there is something out there where it's like there is a pressure to get it out. I kind of cheat with that by doing public streaming of stuff that isn't publicly released, because then it's like, oh, at least I can sort of present an element of it, like it's development. So you get to see it in the creation stage. I'm not willing to do that for every aspect of anything of every game that I ever work on, but at least for setting development or stuff that's, I don't mind being public from an early stage. That's fine to do. If it's just like programming something or whatever, I also don't really care about that. But it's interesting to monitor that urge to finish when it's like really what you should be doing is satisfying your urge to make something high quality.
You want it to be finished, but you should be focusing on making sure it is actually finished.
Yes. Yeah. That's another way to think about it, is like, if it's not, you can say, oh, I just need to be done with this. But if it's not actually finished, then you're not actually done with it. You've just decided to release it publicly in an unfinished state, which is obviously something that I've...
Don't settle for an acceptable release.
Yeah.
Settle for a good release.
So I actually want to talk to you about that exact topic in a different context. But first, I have to use the bathroom. So here we... Now that we've actually watered the toilet, as they say in nowhere, nobody ever fucking says that, but I do. I wanted to say, so we were talking about the whole, the idea of like an acceptable release. I wanted to talk to you about ideas versus execution. This is something that came up in the Jonathan Blow interview that I did most recently, part 2. But in the specific context, I remember way back, and you were talking earlier about this, about how like I came from your audience in many ways. One thing that definitely was sort of like it was an offhanded comment you had made in the Exigo review, where you were looking at the Wikipedia page and you read out that the critics had panned it for not being innovative enough. And you were talking about how like that doesn't make any sense and that's stupid. That made me it was like the first time I had come into contact. I was pretty young when I think you released that playthrough. But either way, nobody had articulated that like actually ideas are not really very worthwhile if the execution is not good to back them up. Like you can have a really great idea, but it's buried underneath shit execution. You'll never see the great idea, or you certainly won't see its potential. You'll have to really do the work for whoever had that idea to think about how good it could have been, because it was just like dumb in this example or whatever. So at the time I was doing very high concept things, and I was doing things that like maybe I was reinventing the wheel without a necessity for that. Or maybe I was just like, there's the whole Chesterton's fence analogy, or it's like a thought principle or whatever, where there's a fence and some people will look at that fence and say, oh, this fence is here for a reason, so let me go find out what that reason is. And then the other people will just say, oh, this fence doesn't seem useful, so I'm just going to remove it. And like the latter people are the people who will have unforeseen second and third order consequences fuck them over more often than not. And sometimes the fence can be removed without any issues. Sometimes the fence needs to be replaced with something instead of just being removed. So you can kind of see where that thought experiment could take you. The reason why I bring this topic up is because I was recently thinking about what kinds of projects I'm actually attracted to as a developer. And I am attracted to projects that I guess people could describe as being innovative, insofar as they re-examine unchecked biases and things that people have just taken from other games, which really I guess are the same thing. And one of the things, like that could be down to like harvesting resources in an RTS. Like maybe there's things about the way that Brood War does it that could be improved. And so one thing you might be interested to know is that we've recently made it so that you can harvest from Vespene geysers directly without putting a refinery structure on top, but it gives you a reduced yield. And then we made the refinery structures more expensive so that you now have to actually think about when to do that, but you can access gas before building the structure. So you could start off with like two gas workers as the cap instead of 3 while it's not got a cap on. So that's the idea, is that like, well, now you can harvest gas earlier, which means maybe your build orders can be more flexible. You don't have to dedicate a worker like a drone early, sacrificing them as Zerg. You don't have to spend the money as any of the other races. Obviously, the SCV is occupied while building one as well. So like, there's things that you don't have to engage with until later, but still have the ability to harvest it from it. And then, so yeah, like there's these unchecked biases, right? So I'm interested in things that are innovative in a sense, like people could call them that, but I don't really think of it as innovation as much as, and maybe it just is, but I think of it more like if I already know all of the characteristics of the game that I'm making, I'm not as interested in making that game. Like part of the fun of making the game to me is that I don't know how it's all going to work, and I don't even know if it's all going to work together, and I want to see if I can solve the problem of how do you make all these things work together. And that's like one part of it, which is really idea-based, but also I guess execution-based is like, how do you execute on combining these ideas? Does this jive at all with like what you find attractive in your projects or historically have? Like, do you have any thoughts on, broadly speaking, the whole idea of innovation and ideas and all that stuff versus just making a competent entry without reinventing any new ideas? Like, where do you come down on that?
Well, I certainly view it in a very different way. I don't think there is innovation. I think the innovation is a buzzword. And it has become a buzzword. It's become very actively used a lot today, where we have these people who have this... It's like a fabricated obsession. They have a fabricated obsession because most of the people making these reviews don't play games. So they wouldn't understand innovation even if it was there. And kind of the part of the problem with games and innovation is most people try to innovate for the sake of innovating. They're chasing the buzz, chasing the... there's another word for it, and I can't quite recall off the top of my head. They're chasing a meme. They're chasing a meme because I think it kind of started with the whole indie fad thing. And this is the mindset that a lot of these people have. It comes from the whole indie fad, where, oh, indie games are so creative because, well, they can't do the tried and true thing that big publishers and developers can, because big publishers and developers can not take risks because games are so expensive because they buy so much of middleware and waste so much of money. Because basically big developers can't take risks, so they can't innovate. Now, that's where this mindset sort of originated from. And so people started criticizing big developers for not being innovative enough. Ergo, the root of the reasoning why saying something is not innovative enough leads to a better is fucking stupid. But when it comes to the actual concepts themselves, I don't even, like, it doesn't even cross my mind. So with my projects, I kind of come from an entirely different mindset, I guess, in a sense that when I try to build a project, it's usually a bunch of core ideas that just kind of grow on their own. So with D&D, I guess a lot of the stuff I've added to 5th edition would be considered innovative or at least explorative. But I didn't build them to be innovative or explorative. I built them to try to basically make the game not shit. I was just trying to take something that I felt to be really crummy and mediocre because it was made for phone users, and try to introduce stuff into it that I felt would be more interesting and engaging. I didn't really, because none of it's really that exciting or engaging, or innovative rather. It's just there to be interactive. Like physical projectiles, projectile phases, just the way I distribute stuff. I avoid a lot of like the save or dies. I try to put more stuff on physical objects and environmental stuff. And to me, it's just kind of like, this is just the thing that just sort of makes sense, right? But we have kind of the issues where with my RTS projects, I looked at Brood War. I came from a Brood War professional background and observing it for the later half of them. And I would see Brood War as being, I gotta make my project at least as good as Brood War. But to innovate past Brood War, to take Brood War and add something onto it that I felt like was at least equivalent with Brood War and meaningfully expanded upon it. At the time, I didn't feel like that I really wanted to attempt that, because it was something that I felt like Brood War is in such a state where if you were to make changes of it, you would incite unforeseen consequences you couldn't really predict, and then things would probably end up being a huge mess. Also, it wasn't like I had a professional scene behind me to objectively review my process in that regard. So in a sense, I saw as taking that formula and trying to change it as being almost, well, one, unnecessary, but I was almost arrogant in a sense that I wasn't really in a position where I felt like I could really innovate from that meaningfully and reflect on it. Because I feel like that when I try to put something in a project, I want it to be objectively good. And if I was to take something that was this well-grounded and make an objectively positive improvement on it, that I alone wasn't in a state where I could really do that. So a lot of my projects, I accepted that there was always going to be some amounts of imbalance or crossover or some other muddying that would cause the project to not really quite reach that golden example. But I felt that so long as things were objectively consistent and good in their own right, then they would stand out. So I simply just didn't view that process in the same way. Like resource harvesting, for example, I mean, at first, thought your idea to me sounds interesting, and it's an interesting change. Whether or not it objectively amounts to being a meaningful improvement from that point, I can't say at this stage. But
sure,
there was a lot of cases where people early on tried to make changes to the resource system in Brood War, and most of the time they change it just to change it. So that's the other part of the innovation meme, is people change things just to change them, just to be different. And that's ultimately what these shills / paid game reviewers are looking for, is to write off about how something is different and how that's so exciting. But it's, in order for something to be different, it has to have a meaningful reason to be different. Now, in the case of your example with the geyser, the meaningful reason to be different is, well, it allows you to explore some more build options early on in particular, especially, again, for a Zerg in particular. Is that, you no longer use this drone for an extractor. A Zerg are always very gas reliant in general.
And worker reliant, crucially. Like, they always want to build more drones until they are forced to not, basically.
Yeah, for Zerg in particular, when my recent experiences back to the Brood War campaign about how you're basically one basic mutalisk half the time, or you're stuck just massing Hydras off one geyser, and there's always there's lots of expansions, half of them doing have geysers, or you are forced into a low tech versus a high tech, and then you got to get all these upgrades to have equal parity, but you're always so fucking gas starved as the most gas dependent race. So that's my experience, where it's well, at least you get your gas a little bit faster. That would definitely be a meaningful change. A lot of people would do very large sweeping changes, and this is what the whole innovation fad leads you into, is people got to change fucking everything and change all this shit just to be different, just to be seen as innovative. It's really just about being interpreted as being innovative. They don't really have any actual goal behind it just to be different, other than in certain cases where people are shitty at games, so they introduce automation. As is seen with a lot of the RTSs to come after StarCraft, is people who sucked at StarCraft had to make their own RTS that was easier. Warcraft 3 and all them Dota clones and stuff like that are basically, they're trying to pass themselves off as RTSs, and they're not. I've seen people unironically refer to Dota as an RTS, and it's just...
It's tagged as an RTS on Steam, bro.
It's pathetic. Well, Dark Souls is tagged as story rich, so yeah, that's tells you a lot.
That's like when you see games that are literally just movies, but you click you make a choice to go somewhere else or whatever, and you're basically watching stuff and then clicking to progress to the next scene, and they call that choices matter. That's a tag. It's well, it's funny. I bring it up comedically, but that's why we made the geyser change. One of the major reasons is because we wanted you to have more meaningful and interesting choices to make in the game. Obviously, they mean choices matter in a fucking story sense, where your choice is reflected in the narrative. But in the context of the geyser, one of the things we realized is that it's meaningful when you choose to build your structure, insofar as that's part of your build order. But it's never a choice between not building it and building it. Eventually, you will always build it. And I'm not saying that it's never a good thing to have something that's always done, because that's obviously too reductive. But in this case, we saw an opportunity to create space where players could differentiate themselves in terms of their broad strategic outlook and personality and playstyle, as well as obviously skill, by deciding when to upgrade their geysers and thus get further gas harvesting versus keep it unupgraded but have a lower yield in terms of like how frequently you can get the returns. So that was like the major thing, is we wanted to create interesting play space for people to make an interesting decision, a compelling and meaningful decision. And we felt like there was space to do that. Now, whether it, like you said earlier, like whether it will yield a more positive outlook is entirely different. But at the same time, I mean, you played it back when it was still called Hydra, and the game was obviously very, very different than Brood War. It had 50 units or something at the time, and we have even more new units now. So it's like, what are you going to say? It's not like we're making that change to vanilla StarCraft, right? So there's like a distinction there where also we're making an observation based on the current game state. We don't like these aspects. We do like these aspects. We think we can do more with this aspect. So let's do that. So yeah, there's a lot of decision making that went into it, but I basically brought it up as a concrete example because it's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, I don't really care that some people on a fucking review website are going to potentially look at that and say that's innovative. I care that it actually makes a meaningful, positive impact to the overall game, which is sort of like what you were saying. I think another point in your favor of like, as not that I'm necessarily running cover, but the idea that like, oh, I don't feel like I can make a meaningful distinction or improvement to the game. You also didn't have access to reverse engineering skills and like a plugin thing that we do. Like I won't lie. I mean, you can imagine how fucking stupid hardcode nonsense. Like one of the hardest parts about this Vespene rework was making it so that when you right-clicked the geyser, an error message didn't pop up. It's not that the thing didn't work; it worked fine, but it just still had an error message because that was hard-coded in like 2 other functions that weren't even related or necessary. So like the shit that we had to go through was stupid, as expected in Brood War. But like 20 functions hooked later, we were able to get it done. Also, the fact that AI can do it is really exciting because obviously you would never expect the AI to be able to recognize that, but they even know to only put 2 on an uncapped geyser and only put 3 on the Metzen ones that are capped. Like, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Reverse engineering opens a lot because...
Well, you almost can't have the ideas until somebody says it's okay to have this idea, if you know what I mean. And like, it's a meta thing where over time, if you're always constrained, every time you have an idea and then you try to implement it, the game engine or wherever you're operating within says, fuck you. Eventually you're going to be like, well, somebody's going to say fuck you to me when I try to do that. So I'm just not going to do that. Like, it's a subconscious thing, I think.
Absolutely. So. It like that was something I talked a lot about it and bitched a lot about it for years and years and years, because every single game I dealt with from when I started in 1998 until I pretty much dropped modding in like 2016 is hardcode, and it's always been something that's in my way. It's just like StarCraft, literally everything is hard-coded. In Armageddon Onslaught, I walked into that with a slew of different ideas. Probably 90% of them I had to throw out because it just wouldn't work. Things like the random projectile speed didn't work. That was absolutely baffling, but if you tried to change the projectile speed in the AI script, it just wouldn't behave. I would crash the game at random. There was just like all the weird little behavior.
You had no useful debugging tools either.
Yeah.
So.
You had no idea how anything was going to work. Like, I built up this understanding of how the StarCraft AI works, and it was a very solid and fairly reliable understanding in how commands works. But at the same time, it wasn't reliable because StarCraft's AI wasn't reliable. A lot of the stuff that just superficially seemed like it should work would just not work, like the AI building 2 of the super units when they're maxed at 1. You had half the commands that were just bugged or bugged up as the time went on. You had to place guard issues, defense. All this shit was just fucked all over the place. You couldn't get reliability out of it, even in cases where you would put literally tens of thousands of hours into this game, and you still were making basically educated guesswork at the best of times. And then, you guys started reverse engineering the AI and finding out what stuff actually works, and then fixing it in some cases. And this is like, if this had happened for me in like 2006, it probably would have changed the course of everything I had ever done. Hardcode had always been a problem, and so you just were kind of like a used to these issues. StarCraft 2, same thing, trying to deal with the AI. all the AI stuff is built into natives. Most of it isn't documented in the slightest shred of fashion. You discover the AI time actually leaks over time, gets slower as the game goes on. Things are very unreliable. The way that the fucking melee wave handling and the defense works is black magic at the best of times. There was comments in there from beta that were basically, "Hey, you should fix this," and it named I forget his Andy Bont, King Arthur from Camelot. So we knew about him. They just removed the comments, never fixed the AI, and then it was
Obviously,
Blizzard themselves obviously never used that for the campaign, even though all the framework was there really to do so. Never even exposed most of it to the editor at all to begin with. So you might have conceived a bunch of this stuff as hard code if you never actually stopped to look at the MPQ files and look at the Galaxy files. The editor doesn't have access to any defense functions from the AI whatsoever, and even if it did, they break. JMS exposed those to the editor for me. Well, guess what? They don't work properly because, drumroll, you need the whole wave system from the melee in order for it to function. So you might have thought that was hard-coded, but it really wasn't. But everything within that was hard-coded. So we tried to get that to work, and then we had to give up. Meanwhile, in Unreal 4, you have full source access. So right now, I'm running on like a customized version of the development branches, and we're talking about Unreal 5. Well, HKS is got this build of Unreal 5. That's where I got it from. That has a whole bunch of shit in it. Like, for example, before Unreal 4 would have a nag that would bitch at you if you had fraps on, because fraps and its driver hooking can cause issues with Unreal 4, and people would whine about it to Epic, and Epic would be like, "I guess we'll just tell them just to turn off fucking fraps and a nag." Well, we just removed that out of the source, and it's gone. And there was like other like little UI changes that we would just disable in the source. Then we're normally exposed to it. I think one of the things I mentioned was Unreal 5 changed the way a lot of the UI looks. And I didn't like the way that the Boolean checkmarks looked, where they went from being like bright yellow to being like this dark blue. They weren't quite as readable to me at a glance. And HKS was like, "Oh, I'm gonna just go fix that." Nice. So having source access is an insurmountable game changer. Now, when I was working in Armageddon Onslaught, I had Poi Quirt helping me a little bit, and he was setting up the custom font injection and stuff like that. And it really, we never really quite got working well. There was like noise in the font, and it was overflowing, and like the small resolution and stuff gave us some issues. But that at the time was a big game changer. Like, it was nice to have that stuff, but it was certainly a real boon for you to have access to the people that you did, like Niev, and having access to reverse engineering, and then Veek as well, having programmatic skill and being interested in it. The closest I had at the time was Broodkiller, and I gave him a lot of suggestions for the DAT editor, and then he just kind of like disappeared. He fell up his own asshole and disappeared forever, and it never really was finished. Like, I wanted integrated string editing into it, because it just made sense to have access to that inside that editor.
Yeah.
And that was when, he disappeared. So could have made some big strides at that point, but it never really happened. It is, I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but I'm just noting that absolutely there's a lot of perception that changes about what you can and can't do when you can only do so much. Age of Wonders 2, which is like a Heroes of Might and Magic turn-based game, I had a huge project in that going for quite a long time. The editor, like, all the spells and everything are all hard-coded. The AI is completely hard-coded. In order to get AI to build towns on the world map, you had to put like attack values onto the pioneers that built them, and then the AI's hard-coded algorithms would say, "Hey, this is a combat unit, I'm going to build this." But the AI also has hard-coded behavior to build a town with them. So the second they would leave the build radius of another town, they would instantly build a town with it. Presto! You've got an AI that builds towns. So at best, a boilerplate. Sometimes they'd be attacking with pioneers. Pioneers cost population from another town, so they might end up stripping all the population off their town. So yeah, a double-edged sword, but that was how you got it. But their world map aggression was very low. They were terrible at actually closing games when they have a huge advantage. And there was just nothing you could do about that without trying to reverse engineer the game. I think one guy did reverse engineer some of the game. I had some hex value changes in it, but no, it really just a lot of the game is just inaccessible. And the project was very complete. I had lots of units. I had voice acting, sounds, graphics. For 16 races, I had most of them at least somewhat playable. But the project died because you just couldn't do anything with the AI, and therefore your games just really weren't enjoyable at the end of the day. So it absolutely changes a lot about how you perceive this stuff when you can and can't do stuff. Like I was saying, a lot of people changed the resource system in StarCraft. They made it injections. Is one that stood out to me. I think it was the Ad Astraz conversion had injections or something like that. And the first thing that happened when I went into it is I discovered you can snowball the fuck out of that right away. Just take control, early control, and then that's it. You're ahead on injections. That's why those those ideas didn't really work out. And I mean, again, it was just there just to be different. So it's when I'm looking at introducing stuff, what I'm looking at is from an interactive standpoint. Is this interesting to interact with? And then from there on, the changes really, like if I'm evolving something or trying to make something more interesting, it really comes down to just how it feels to play. And only much later after that do I start really looking at like the individual balance beyond that. So with my project right now, once we've caught up to everything, I'll be back to trying to implement some new opponents for you to fight. And then evolving the player moveset a little bit more. And one of the things I'm thinking about a lot is how much mobility do I want the player to have? Now, in an innovative game, a lot of these games have like fake mobility, like teleporting to an enemy or something like that. And I kind of wanted to have teleportation, but a targeted teleportation. The problem with this is a lot of these, it's like a trace off the player in your cursor or your crosshair or something like that. And I was trying to think of ways I could do it differently, not because I wanted to be more innovative, but because I wanted to be faster and easy to do on reflex as opposed to having to manually aim this. So when we come to exploring that, we're probably going to see me fuck around with that a lot, or maybe not implement it at all. As a result, based entirely on just how it feels to actually play. I have a very, very, very kind of like strict, difficult to put into words, like idea of how things should feel, how to play. Where things should follow a very consistent tempo and not break away from how other content is exposed, expressed, or otherwise interacted with. So right now, the project kind of plays a little bit like Dark Souls, just faster. If I implement other kinds of movements, like I'm thinking a secondary dash function on top of the existing dash function, so you can double dash, but the second one's longer range, it's going to completely change all that right away. And then I have to readdress every single other element in reflection to that. So, with the resource system in particular with StarCraft, when you make big sweeping changes to that, you have to readdress the entire rest of the game in that light now. And then address it unit by unit by unit, unit test every single individual thing in light of this change. So
yeah, well, that's exactly what we ended up doing, is rebalancing every unit cost. And it is an involved process. And I guess a lot of people probably don't want to go through they want the cool new idea part of it. Like they basically get attached and fixated on the wrong aspect of it. Like there's the aspect that it's new or innovative or whatever. And then there's the aspect that it's actually a meaningful change, and they get fixated on the former as opposed to the latter. And then they don't actually do the work to make sure the latter is even true. That's what it seems like to me, because you do get a lot of false, fraudulent innovation where it's not actually that all that cracked up. I will say, since we touched on the whole, you're stifled for ideas when your creativity is stifled if you're not able to actually execute on the ideas when you have them and stuff like that. I wanted to point out to you, I wanted to reveal information to you, which is that we did actually discover in our code divings, shout out to Veek for this one, of course. There was a reason, you may have noticed, first of all, that sometimes AI refuse to expand. Yeah. The reason the AI will sometimes refuse to expand is because there is code that says if I have 3,000 resources in any resource, 3,000 gas or 3,000 minerals, I will not expand. Which means you can have an AI with 400 minerals and 3,000 gas, and it just refuses to expand. And this only happens with melee AI, obviously, because campaign AI doesn't expand.
Oh my god.
Here's another one for you. You'll like this one, because it involves the number 3. AI refuse to ever tell one worker to attempt to build more than 3 times in its lifespan.
What?
Yep.
What?
Yep.
Oh my god.
So that means if you cycle through all of your workers because you're telling the AI to build a lot of structures in one base, eventually it will refuse to do so because they've all tried 3 times. So,
holy shit. Wow. This is precisely the kind of shit I'm talking about, where, you know, you've watched the AI for so many hours. You have a sort of an understanding of how they kind of work. But there is shit like this under the hood you would never fucking guess because it's too fucking stupid.
Well, yeah. I mean, another one that really fucked us was... obviously, we fixed all of these, by the way. But one of them that really fucked us was there's an internal timer on buildings that tells them when they can be used for requests, which doesn't mean like training units. It's only... I'm pretty sure, anyway, if you can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure my understanding is it's only used for morphing. So the reason why AI are notoriously terrible at morphing their creep colonies into something else is because they have this like 45 frame, which is like 2.5 seconds or so. It's like weird timer where if these intervals it's not ready, or like there's something else higher priority, it just will not fucking do it. It's like really weird and obscure. And the only reason this exists, there's also stuff like this that happens for all units, not just AI units. It's like there's a cooldown on attack timer, there's a cooldown on movement timers or stop order timers or something. And we've removed all that shit. I assume the reason why they did that is because processors were bad at the time that they launched the game or something. But it's really bizarre that they decided to do stuff like that. And the AI building one in particular is just really stupid.
Yeah, that would explain a lot of behavior where I had like money injected Terran or Protoss. And it was early in the game, and they were perfectly capable of building however many structures, but they would always stop at certain breakpoints every single time. And it would also explain why suddenly a new worker would pop out and then it would start building.
Yeah, exactly. So
that is an eye-opening way in the sense that now you know why the toilet is plugged.
Yeah, you know who's putting the shit in there. It's Blizzard.
Oh my god.
So yeah, I just wanted to share that. I knew you'd have a lovely reaction to it. It's just absolutely absurd that like the things that we just discovered. But yeah, you should. I mean, not yet, because as always, we're working on some big fucking update. At some point, though, I'd love to have you take an hour or something and run through like an AI observation game of the new patch.
Oh yeah,
because since you last looked at it, there's been loads of updates. One of them being that we actually have AI that kites and micros their units and stuff. So they try to get advantages on you in that sense.
Oh, yeah.
It's not perfect or anything. It's in Brood War, but especially most recently, we've made tons of updates to that. So there's going to be some like shit that would be like, holy fuck, if I had this in 2006, like you were saying earlier, it's just like redefines what is possible with an AI opponent. And as a result of all these improvements, like the improvements to making sure that they actually, satisfy their requests appropriately and stuff, we've been able to reduce the multipliers for resources down to a consistent one for all races, where previously Zerg always had to be the ones that got the most because they were always gimped. Terrans were slightly worse than Protoss, and Protoss were just the best, mostly because I think their units are just easier to attack move, like blindly A-move. But then we added the kiting, and we've improved it, and so now like the armies are on more even terms, and the request things make the requests, like the AI macro levels, on more even terms. They build a fuck ton of units, especially since we removed supply, which is another sweeping change we did. It's like fucking ridiculous how many units they'll throw at you. So it's pretty entertaining to attempt and fail to beat them every time.
Yeah, with Armageddon, it was always like they had the strong units, but there was always these break points, especially within like the first like 15, 20 minutes of the game, where the AI it was very inconsistent in how it behaved. And yet they were the simplest AI I had ever created. It was literally build some structures, build some units, and they has so many problems. And I remember running into that. I was like, I have been building AI for this game for over 10 fucking years. And I've been able to make it work fairly consistently with like Zapok, except for like smaller maps or something. Now we have like the dumbest AI, the simplest AI imaginable, and we still have these kinds of problems with it. You just had to accept that there's just tons of shit you just don't know about that is causing headaches under the hood, and there's just really nothing you can do about it because there was no precedent to ever like probe into this. Nobody had ever done it before. So, you know, learning about this stuff now, it really just fills me with more and more disgust. Like, it's kind of like my experience with Diablo 2. Is one of the guys I talked to is reverse engineering Diablo 2. And, you know, I worked in Diablo 2 in like 2003 and then again, and I think maybe like 2005. And then I think there was the Project Lolly project, which was maybe around 2007, 2008. And then, like, I had so many issues with map transitions and other stuff like that. And he'd be like, oh, yeah, the map space is all fucked. And here's what I mean, Diablo 2 has more bugs in it by like probably like 1,000-fold over StarCraft. Because first it was made by Blizzard North, Condor, and then Synapse and Silicon, Blizzard South took over and really started fucking around with it. And then there was like just a lot, like Lord of Destruction just added in so much shit. And you had Peter. Peter came into it afterwards with a patch, and that's where the fuckery really set in. And there's so many bugs, it's just crazy. And it's like, yeah, this is why that happened. And it was like stuff that you had no way to know as a modder. You had no way to know how this was behaving or anything like that. You had to have reverse engineering knowledge with it. That's certainly in the case of StarCraft. And, you know, it reinforces what I have always said once I got into Unreal is modding is dead. It has been dead for years. Anybody who's getting into modding at this point, as opposed to taking something they have source access to, like Unreal, or making their own engine in your case, you know, they are fucking fooling themselves. They're wasting their own time. They are... It's just pointless to even bother at this point, because in any given game, Blizzard or not, it's a lot of the time you are trying to work around other people's shit. And a lot of these people today, and I guess back then, not as much back then, the whole developers had absolutely unrealistic expectations. Developers don't play games. They don't care about games. They're there for a paycheck. The quality of the shit is not going to hold up to any kind of scrutiny whatsoever. And now you're trying to build your own shit on top of it while not being skilled enough to build your own engine or whatever. Anything that's going to behave well, it's not going to. Like, just look at Skyrim. Skyrim is a absolute fucking disaster, and the modding scene just makes it so much worse. And I mean, the modding scene is retarded in general because you have all the insanity of Nexus and everything related, and then you have the mod loaders that don't work properly, and then you have the scripting engine and all this giant layered shit heap where none of the layers work together at all. Yeah. And it's no surprise the game fucking crashes every 5 minutes, and people have nonstop issues with the 32-bit limits and memory management and all this other crap. And Gamebryo is just like screaming as they're beating it with newspapers. And like why do they bother? Like, if you want to make your mod with Vor and Horsecocks, make it in Unreal. It'll be faster. You know, Unreal isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but you are much less likely to have constant issues with the way behavior works, just having access to that behavior to begin with.
This obviously brings us to, since we were talking so heavily about modding and reverse engineering and all this other shit, recently, as of right now in June 2022, there have been some rumblings about Frost Giant Studios, which is the new hip trendy arm of Blizzard, ex-Blizzard development.
Yes, the people who failed to be in Blizzard.
Yes, basically. So I didn't watch this interview that has recently done the rounds. I think yesterday is actually when it was live streamed. I'll try to remember to link it in the description in case people want to watch it. But it was a mostly positive interview with one of the people from Frost Giant Studios who's handling UI development and wanted to talk about modding. And he talked about, one of the things that I know he talked about in there was that he went in and quote unquote fixed discoverability on the StarCraft 2 arcade, which by all accounts is just a lie, unless it was fixed for like a week and then it was broken again later. But I highly doubt that that's actually what happened. Although I guess
people still boost their maps to this day.
Yeah, so I'm not really buying that one, buddy. But assuming we just take their, like, the problem is it feels so poisoned. Like, the well is already so poisoned when you're dealing with this company that I can't ever really believe that they are legit and actually this isn't just some like elaborate marketing exercise to, you know, talk with Reddit or whatever. But the thing that they always go on for when they do these interviews is usually that like they're trying to like talk the talk before they've demonstrated anything about it. And we've talked briefly about it on the server recently because it's just been circulating in the news of the RTS space, whatever that is. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that in this recording about like these companies, not just Frostbite Studios specifically, but the idea that like companies are now trying to put forth mod support as a core feature that they're holding on. In theory, on paper, you'd think for people like us who've complained about hard code, that would actually be a good thing, and it's something that we could get behind. But for me, I'll give my piece first. It's just that the reason I want to mod all these games is because they're shit, and I want to have a good game to play, and that's usually easier to mod something that's at least reasonable, if a little jank, compared to building your own game, which I'm doing anyway, but I don't want to have to do that every single time. I want to have like a reasonable experience within a genre that maybe I'm not interested in making a game for. And so... Or I'm like the Cosmonic and Broodwar cases, we're literally making a prototype of what our RTS is going to be. That's why we're doing all these crazy changes. So there's like reasons why I might do it. But the reason why that's why I'm doing it. It's if you make your game good enough by default, you know, maybe it will never actually satisfy every single box I would tick, but I'm not going to go and mod a game if like all I need to do is change like one thing or whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to go through the trouble generally. And I'm just going to enjoy like the positive experience you've built if you built a positive product. So that's where my take is on it. It's like you guys pushing modding before I've even seen what your game is seems like a really disingenuous thing. And also that like, it's worrying. It's like if the first thing I hear you say, or one of the first things I hear you say about your game is that, don't worry, you can customize the game to do it exactly what you want. It's like, well, you're the game developer though, and you should be able to make a game that I want to play. That would be the whole reason I buy your game, not to mod it. I mean, like that just doesn't make any fucking sense to me. So what's your take on this? And like, how do you feel about the developers and the publishers and the companies pushing modding as their new fucking savior?
These are people who are not gamers that their marketing department has finally caught up to the headlines 20 years ago. It is extremely dishonest. Frost Giant Games has never demonstrated even the slightest that they are competent or creating an interesting game. They're memesters that failed to be Blizzard employees. People who work at Blizzards, other than the people who are getting their breast milk stolen, they really have no reason to quit. It is free money. And well, I guess unless they drive you to suicide, maybe, but this is going to be a very small minority in an extremely overly large company. You're basically printing money. And it's great job security because you're always going to be printing money. If they're not in the company anymore, it's because they failed. Or maybe in the cases like Designer Dave had said, is that some people are very greedy for power in the company, they can't get it, and then they quit. Well, what ends up happening is they end up forming these shitty indie studios. And even the time for that fad has passed because the only really successful studios to come out of Blizzard was like ArenaNet. And ArenaNet, they shot themselves in the foot and they are free-falling. They have been free-falling for a long time. With Guild Wars 2, an absolute insane disaster. And then, of course, with League of Legends as well, you know, the time for these kinds of memes has passed. So what ends up happening with a lot of, I've seen this too, this bullet point about mod support, is it's 20 years too late. Like, the time was too late to do this when Project Offset was on the horizon. And now Project Offset ended up being a nothing burger because Intel bought it out. But not very long after that, Project Offset generated the interest. The UDK came out. And when the UDK came out, that was the end of modding. There was no reason for anybody super serious about mods at that point to really like get into that stage of modding to want to mod anymore. Now, the UDK had limitations at that point. To be one of the source access, I believe that required a license still. And Epic gradually chiseled away the requirements and the costs of those licenses over and over and over and over again as time went on. Before, it was quite expensive to get a license for these third-party engines. It was basically inaccessible for indie developers, for modders, for anyone. Nobody really wanted anything to do with it. But you did still have some fairly large projects in, you know, let's say in Source, in Unreal Tournament 2004, stuff like that. We hit the UDK, that was the game changer. That was the real big game changer. And one of the pivotal projects that we saw was, again, I mentioned this in the interview and probably in Big Boy's Table in the past, is Dungeon Defenders, where you had just, I think, 4 guys. And now they had some experience as well. They came in, and in a month, they had a playable demo of a hero-centric tower defense, where as a dude, you kind of ran around, you built towers in a third-person interface. And that was really one of them, I think, as far as I ever saw, one of the first implementations of such a thing. You might think of it as innovative at the time. Now, Dungeon Defenders would later then release the actual product not too long after that, I think maybe a year or 2 after the fact. And it was an all right product. You know, it was one of those cartoony tower defense things. It was effectively a phone game, but it did have progression mechanisms to it. It was kind of interesting to play, and some of the heroes and stuff they introduced later on. Oh, then they made Dungeon Defenders 2. They became woke, and then they killed their company. So, yeah, that's its own little suicide. But that was basically a mod originally. That was just a mod. And what it demonstrated was that you could just come into the UDK and just make this and then turn it into a game. Just like that. You had a free demo, boom, it was a game. It was a fairly reasonably successful game for what it was in its heyday. And then, you know, they made poor decisions, as many of these companies often do, and then they suicided it. But for what it was at the time, it was a mod and it was successful. So anybody looking to turn their mods into a commercial success had an avenue to do that. They had all these resources and stuff readily available. And if that wasn't enough for them, now we had the Unreal 4 came out. When Unreal first came out, Unreal 4, it was subscription based, but that got dropped pretty quickly. And then they even refunded you money. I had money sitting in my account because I was a subscriber for a time. And Unreal 4 is full source access. So if you want to do stuff in C++, if you want to implement C, if you want to do anything, you can go right ahead. If you want just to stick to stuff that you're familiar with as a modder, there was the blueprint system and everything else related. And then we have Unity. Now, I haven't worked with Unity, and everything I've ever seen to come out of Unity is an absolute disaster. But I'm going to tell you, if people can make games that are as jank and fucked up as Genshin Impact or Fate Grand Order and use Unity for it, you know, there's really no excuse for any of these people to still be using like Skyrim or whatever like that. Like, you may as well just use Unity or Unreal. And that's the thing, is you had a lot of bitching about mod support and stuff like that way back, again, 20 years ago, you know, because StarCraft had an editor. And now that wasn't modding, but that was where a lot of people started off, which was making maps for StarCraft, for Warcraft 3 or stuff like that. And then a lot of people ultimately ended up perceiving that as mods. And then you had, like, say, custom servers and Counter-Strike that maybe changed some stuff. You had Chaos UT, which was fairly large. And all these other things that sort of, like, brought more exposure. And then eventually, for the more mainstream people who weren't into, like, the RTS or whatever, you had Bethesda, you had Oblivion, you had Skyrim. Almost everybody knows about the porn mods for these games just because of the silliness and the publicity that they've gotten. And then you had the whole hot coffee incident that, if you're not familiar with, I believe that was one of the GTA games had hidden content in it that was lewd in some shape or fashion. And then that stirred a huge controversy because modders exposed it, and that brought more modders to the scene as well. One of the other things that also exposed modding to the mainstream was Blizzard making fake bitching about porn for Overwatch. They were like, oh my god, there's porn for Overwatch. It's so bad and naughty. Please go see fetus traffic as a result. Yeah. And then that's not a mod, but that puts you on the same stream where you have people taking assets and making changes to them to make porn out of it. And that drives modding, and then modding in general, porn mods, that exists for Final Fantasy XIV, which is an MMO. And for World of Warcraft, is people making client-side changes to these games to either bring in one of the other most major things that's mainstream is post-processing injectors, where you can take these DLLs or whatever, and you can inject bloom, HDR, tone mapping, all this other kinds of shit in it. That's a real big thing in Skyrim, but these tone mappers support all kinds of stuff. You see them all over the place. And I mean, I did modding in Dragon's Dogma just to remove or subdue a bunch of the overlays for lights and stuff like that because they were too large and too glaring, particularly on the PC version. And, you know, it just became, as time went on, people became, especially in like Europe, people just sort of had this acceptance that, oh, if I can go and I just make changes to it. The problem with official tools is that they are very sterilized. Very, very sterilized. And developers are monetarily invested in handing you these tools. With StarCraft 2, originally, that was the marketplace that took them nearly a decade to bring out and was dead on arrival because it was far too fucking late anyways.
Yeah.
A lot of the people that hooked onto StarCraft 2 were for the marketplace. Well, that didn't show up, and the editor was a piece of shit anyways. And the editor was a piece of shit, but all the potential tool developers said, hey, there's already an editor here. I don't need to get involved. Why am I going to make an editor? There's already official support. That's the excuse I was given a lot. Even though the editor is what it was. Is people would say, I'm not going to get bothering that.
Well, don't you think in some ways it's like when the developers release their own tools. Now, I don't really think of it like this because it's usually, the problem is that's usually not their own tools, is it? I think that's probably the biggest issue. When we release our own game, we are going to have the tools that we ourselves use to like do data entry and come up with abilities and stuff. We're going to do our best to expose that to people who want to make their own scenarios and their own tech trees and units and stuff. But that's not like, because we didn't go away and build tools specifically for the purpose of allowing modders to interface with the game. That's
why I say it's sterilized.
Yeah, we specifically, like, we are literally just giving you what we made for ourselves to make our work easier and better and more efficient. That's the difference, is I think when you have official tools that weren't actually used in the makings of the scenarios, what you often find is that that's basically an admission. Like, we literally spent money on salaries and time and budget. Like, we actually put effort into making you tools that you can make your own version of our game with, because, like, I don't know what the because is. I guess the because is, like, it's a marketing bullet point, but I interpret it as, like, an admission that we don't know how to make a game that's satisfying, and we're just going to let you fucking do the rest. So, like, we're not confident enough in our own vision, so we're going to go ahead and make these modding tools. I mean, I guess maybe there's, like, middleware or something that they can't legally release, but that's its own fucking rat's nest. So.
Like Face FX for Blizzard, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just feel like it's just terrible that you would go through the effort of putting together tools
it's a waste.
And then just don't use them, like, you know?
Like with StarCraft 2, they used XML for everything. So they don't even know how bad that data editor really is.
Yeah.
So they created two problems. The first was they turned away potential tool developers who most certainly would have done a better job in just a weekend. And then all the people who were stuck with what remains, who weren't tool developers, were now using something that was an absolute piece of shit, performed utterly terribly, and had no future-proofing whatsoever. And then a further extension of that is the art tools, the 3ds Max plugin that's advertised as an art tool. It's not an art tool. It's a plugin for 3ds Max to export. But by the time they released it for at the time, a very old version of 3ds Max. And then it was sterilized. And then there is versions that were necessary for the newer versions of the game that supported like their cloth physics and stuff like that they never released, and the only way you could get those is through individual Blizzard employees that were leaking them. And there, as far as I know to this day, there was never an official release of that, when literally it would just be, you know, one of their people going onto the website, posting it on the website, saying, hey, here's the tools. Just reference the original documentation. You don't offer any support, use at your own risk, etc. Wash your hands straight, but hey, now you got the plugin, you can use it. You know, they couldn't even be asked to do that. Years and 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 years into the project, they couldn't be asked to do that whatsoever. And yes, what you end up getting is sterilized shit, because modders are just people coming in to make stuff, and the developers don't even come from their viewpoint to begin with. They think, oh, well, we'll make them some tools to change the game. Maybe they want to change some stat values. Maybe they want to add in some map files. When, you know, like the Blizzard's dependency system is basically, you know, as an idea, as a framework, it's perfect for a mod, because you can remove dependencies for the default data that you don't need, then you don't have to load it, then you don't need to have it. Or hypothetically, you could strip out what you want out of them if you wanted to take some kind of missile data or art references or sound entries or whatever from it. You can do that, but otherwise you can choose not to have that. You can have something completely independent from Blizzard's data altogether. The dependencies can be your own isolated thing. It's very similar to the way a lot of other games archive and handle their files, where the game executable is effectively a loader, and then you can choose which archives and therefore which data actually load. But instead of doing this outside of the game so that you can load something that can modify the entire game, those dependencies are slaved to map files, which defeats the entire point of having them to begin with. And then the whole system it becomes very map-centric as opposed to a mod. You can't even have mods in StarCraft 2. So you have to have maps opt into the dependencies in order for them to take effect. It just defeats the entire purpose. And you had an entire system, and then the execution was just as pants on head retarded as you could get. They didn't even think about what the fuck they were doing, because they aren't making the projects. They're not associating with people who are making projects. They really just don't give a shit. It's just there, right? It's just how this part of the system works. They exposed it in their own special needs way, and then they just let you go, and then they didn't give a shit. And then one of the other problems is sort of like the campaign thing in Warcraft 3, which kind of works but doesn't really. Managing data between that and dealing with the interfaces and that had all kinds of issues associated with it. If I recall, I don't know about right now with the refunded version, but if I recall, one of the file importers within Warcraft 3 didn't even support selecting multiple files. So if you wanted to mass delete stuff, you are better off opening up that in WinMPQ than doing it in their own editor. And then the way that like the StarCraft 2 editor lists up. Like, the problem with all these official tools from official sources is that they are sterilized. They are not the official tools. They're not what the developer use. And I mean, honestly, most developer tools are shit to begin with anyways. It probably wouldn't have been a better experience. But it does drive away people who might have been capable of making a better experience, but weren't involved enough to look at the official tools and say, hey, this is subpar, I can do better. The source for those tools is not provided, so you can't specialize and fix stuff that is wrong, like the interface in StarCraft 2's editor. If you had the source for it, somebody could have slapped up something better within a day, and then everybody would have been happy. You have just incredible dishonesty, but now you have people talking about mod support. It's 2022. Anybody who is still modding a game is doing it for a very, very good reason. And that very good reason is because of sunken time. People are still modding Doom and not modding or making shooters and other stuff because they're really sunk into that. That's the pipeline that they're interested in. That's the engine that they're familiar with. That's where their projects are. That's where their community is. If you haven't pulled them off of Doom in 2022, you're not going to do it now. Same with StarCraft. If somebody is making a StarCraft map and they're spawning unit waves and they only support vanilla StarCraft and Brood War is cheating, you are probably not going to pull them off of StarCraft in 2022. Nothing you do, nothing you say is going to pull them off of it and bring them over to your phone game. It's not going to happen. If somebody is still making Skyrim porn mods and you've got Unity or Unreal 4 or your own Hitler furry game on Steam and you haven't pulled them off, you're not going to pull them off now. They are sunken into that. They're not coming out. New people who actually give a shit, as in not, the flighty people, I'm going to make a mod. I changed the name. I guess I'm done now. Bye. Actual people who are actually looking at sinking years into development time, they're not going to be looking at mods anymore. They're going to be looking at something that gives them everything. And Unity does not give you everything, but a lot of people turn to Unity because apparently, I don't know, it's more flowery. I think Unity stocks have actually been tanking for a while now. But some people still go to Unity, other people go to Unreal. And the biggest issue with Unreal and maybe Unity is there is a learning curve and information is not really that easy to get. You're stuck using YouTube for a lot of it. But you know what? There are some people who have good YouTube videos. Their audio quality is shit. And then there are people who have acceptable YouTube videos, very mainstream, very easygoing, very, informative and good to get into. You've got Prisma Dev, You've got Ryan Laley or whatever his name is. You have the official one made by Zach, one of the Epic employees, Zach. Old videos for an old version of Unreal, still applicable to a lot of Unreal 5. He has a great voice, great pacing, great at describing stuff. He should really make more. All these mix of resources, anybody who's actually interested in getting this shit is willing to devote to it. Those resources are there. They will get you started from nothing, like they did for me. And there is none of that equivalency for any of modding at all that I've ever experienced. Not in StarCraft, not in Skyrim, definitely not in Homeworld, not in Sins of a Solar Empire. When you are modding, the developer is not going to help you that much. Because even in official support, you've got Blizzard where StarCraft 2's fucking help originally linked to the forum. And as far as I know, probably to present day, at least for the longest time, it just linked to a fucking 404. There is no documentation. They can't be asked to document it. This is not a tool that they used. This is not a pipeline that they used. If they had official employee training support that they were willing to give you, it wouldn't even apply to anything that you're doing. And they probably don't, because most of the people making the game had no fucking idea what they were doing to begin with, as evident by the final product. A lot of those people probably aren't even in the company anymore. People who wrote any documentation that they might have had are probably not even in the company anymore. And then you get into licensing. What if it's a special format or on a special service or something that they can't just give you? Well, now you got to have somebody transcribe it. You know, and they just can't be asked to do that. It's all dishonest. Every single step of it is dishonest.
That's definitely what it seems, yeah.
If someone like Fagmon Games wants to sit down and actually have mod support, the way that you're going to do it is you're going to give the source code for your product. And most people are not going to do that.
Sure, yeah.
Very rarely you might see something like the source for Doom or Homeworld come out long after it's relevant. But if you want to really attract people who are really going to be really serious about this, you're going to have source support. And you also have to have a product that's actually going to grab their attention. Like, why would I want to fix your mess?
Yeah.
When I can make my own fucking mess from scratch and save myself the process of unraveling your shit heap to make something that I want, as opposed to just making something that I want. Because when you get into this low-level stuff, when you're dealing with reverse engineering and programming and stuff like that, a lot of the labor and the workload comes to understanding how the third party made their software.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Even when you're working with source code, that source code is usually terrible. It's not self-documenting. Yeah. It's probably not even commented. There is no documentation or references. You're basically trying to read through an entire other language. And that is way too much for almost any modder to get into.
Oh, yeah, and that's also the best case scenario, by the way, is that the source code comes out. Like, id Software, every time they made a game in the early days, they would release the source code of the one that they released previously. It's like, oh, when they made Quake, they released Doom, or whatever the case may have been, like whatever the order was. So, like, that was what they tried to do, starting with Doom, and that did lead to a lot of people picking it up. But maybe if other companies had adopted something similar, or the source code just was leaked or released or some other way, maybe you would have seen more adoption with modding, and that would have been like a more standard thing. But because it was not a standard thing, because people refused to do stuff like that, like, it just, you're not going to get modders as like a big demographic or whatever. No. Now, I can kind of see what they're saying when they talk about custom content and how custom content is like really important or whatever. But I also think that if you just have enough good content of your own, you mitigate a lot of that. So
they want something that'll make them money. They want permanence.
Yeah.
That's what the marketplace was for StarCraft 2. That's what hats are for Team Fortress 2. It's just another source of income. And once you realize that as a custom developer, when you realize that all this company actually wants is just for you to generate them revenue, and even if you come into it wanting to generating revenue for yourself, there are so many better ways to do that. Just make assets and sell them on Unity and Unreal. That is what a lot of people do when they come out of college now, is they just make all their social media, they figure out how to import their assets into Unreal and Unity, and then they just sell their assets. And that's even where a bunch of modders went to, is they realized, hey, if I wanted to make money off of this, I don't even need to make a game. Oh, yeah. I'll just sell my assets to people who do.
You can double dip too, because you can sell it on both on Unity and Unreal.
You can sell that. You can sell them on ArtStation. You can sell them on TurboSquid. You can sell it on CG Trader. You can sell them. There's a whole ton of marketplaces. You can just jump into all of those, you know, And a lot of them you can just sell porn asses.
Well,
and
yeah,
that's
of course. High demand, dude. Because then there's a whole fucking cottage industry of people making porn videos, and they have Patreons too, so they have money to spend.
Yeah, Patreon's another one. They always use Patreon as well. It's not just selling the assets. They've also got to beg for Patreon pay pigs. So that's where a lot of these people go to. And that's your modern industry. The industry now is completely unlike what it was 20 years ago. And most of the people who have the skills to make serious mods, if you were legitimately interested in supporting mods, in encouraging custom content in your product, it's a little too late to do it this way. The whole thing is different. Your PR guy is 20 years old, doesn't understand really what the modern demographic looks like. And yeah, you might get a couple of people coming in making like balance mods or something like that. But if you really want to have a big splash like Skyrim, you have to consider the fact that you are competing with people who are dug into stuff like Skyrim. They haven't left Skyrim as buggy and unreliable and as insanely hard-coded and messy as it is. Chances are you're not going to attract them to your product just because yours is more stable or whatever. If they haven't left it for something like Unity, Unreal, or some other product at this point, you're going to need to have a huge splash elsewhere. And that means that at the end of the day, you should stop worrying about mod support and custom content support and start worrying about actually making a game, because your company is not on track to do that yet.
Well, we'll keep eyes on this space, I guess, because apparently on the 6th of this month, in just 4 days, which is 3 plus 3 divided by 3, that means that they will release their some information. And we all expect them to release basically no information again, because that would be fitting with what their company has done so far, but maybe not. And of course, with all the other developers out there who are also trying to hawk modding, I don't know, man. It seems like a bad idea. At least if that's like, if it's not from like a genuine fucking place, you know?
It's a nice idea. At a superficial glance, supporting custom content's great, but it's never honest. They're always looking just to make money off of it. Like that's the modern developer thing today. You really have to disprove it. And from what commentary I saw pasted, that is not the case. I have no reason to believe this is anything but a money grab.
Speaking of grabbing, I think we're grabbing the stop recording button. That was my segue. We're basically done. It's been 2 hours. We obviously had a nice long recap at the beginning. We covered some stuff related to it. None of the points I initially wanted to cover got covered, but that's okay because we just go where the conversations go. And that means, hey, the next episode will actually be about that probably. So I guess you guys will have to stay tuned till next week or whenever we record another one.
You'll probably hear my big fans coming on by that point.
Fuck yeah, it's summer. You got any final words for us, Mesk?
Remember not to pull the skin too hard or it'll rip.
All right. And that's where we sign off. And I will not be using my mouth, so you're on your own with that one. Bye!